On August 24th, college football season number 150 kicked off with a throwback rivalry between the Miami Hurricanes and the Florida Gators. And it will all end on January 13th in a battle of the Tigers between the LSU Tigers and the Clemson Tigers for the national championship. Johnny Talk Sports here to bring you my national championship game preview and predictions. And just by looking at this matchup on paper, this is what I think is going to be the most exciting national championship game that we have ever seen. Just by looking at this matchup alone, when you look at the quarterbacks, not only do I think that these are the best two quarterbacks in college football, but these are almost without a doubt, the number one overall picks in the next two NFL drafts. We all expect Joe Burrow to go number one overall to the Bengals this April, and we all expect Trevor Lawrence to go number one overall in 2021. So two number one overall picks in the next two NFL drafts, almost without a doubt, facing off for a national championship. And something has got to give in this matchup, because LSU is first in the nation in scoring offense, scoring an average of almost 49 points per game, while Clemson is first in the country in scoring defense, only giving them an average of 11.5 points per game. So something has to give. Will it be the offense wins you games, or will it be the defense wins you championships? What will it be? Some keys to the game for LSU. Stay disciplined. Don't give Clemson free first downs. Don't give them free passes to extend drives. We saw Ohio State make this mistake multiple times, and that's what cost them this Fiesta Bowl. I don't care if you want to blame the refs for it. You could, but I think that doesn't ultimately make the difference in that game. If Ohio State would have converted multiple touchdowns in the red zone instead of having to settle for three, I think that call doesn't end up mattering in the game. And also, if they didn't make so many mental mistakes and allowing Clemson to get back in the game. After having them down 16-0, Ohio State was on the doorstep of making that Fiesta Bowl a blowout. And it ultimately should have been, but Ohio State beat themselves because they gave Clemson extra chances. They gave them free passes to extend drives, and Clemson ultimately took advantage of their second chances on multiple drives, which ultimately was one of the difference makers in that matchup. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back for LSU, who has been dealing with a hamstring injury as of late. He was dealing with it in the semifinal matchup, but he was limited in his play in the Peach Bowl. They kind of limited him on offense, which they didn't need him anyway because LSU ended up blowing out Oklahoma in that Peach Bowl. But I think he's going to have to be a difference maker in the game if LSU wants to win, because Clemson had a very difficult time stopping J.K. Dobbins in the semifinal, because Dobbins ended up breaking out for multiple big plays and long runs, and he was ultimately very tough to stop in the screen game on that last drive of the game, which ultimately ended in a Justin Fields interception. And the third and final key for LSU, get pressure on Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence is a very efficient quarterback and one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football, arguably the second most efficient quarterback in college football behind Joe Burrow when he's given time. And that's going to be a key for really both defenses, is to get pressure on the quarterback, because these are the two most efficient quarterbacks in college football, especially when they're given time to throw. As we saw in the Peach Bowl, Joe Burrow, multiple times throughout this season, when Joe Burrow is given plenty of time, he finds a way to connect with their wide receiver. And I think Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be capable of doing the same if he's given time. And Michael Divinity being back for LSU for this championship game, who has missed the last 6 games for LSU for personal reasons, he is back for this championship game, and that is a huge momentum shift for this LSU defense before this game even begins. And for Clemson, let's go into the keys for them. The first one, no red zone touchdowns on defense. We saw them do a good job with this against Ohio State. Settling for 3 is what ultimately kept Clemson in this football game and prevented it from being a blowout. The game easily could have been probably 21-0 or 21-7 at the half. But instead, Clemson kept it close at halftime. Build holes for ETN. When Travis Etienne is given a running lane, he has the ability to break away for long runs. And Etienne was the 7th leading rusher in college football this season. But in the last 2 seasons, Etienne has proved himself to be the best running back in college football, even with Jonathan Taylor in Ohio State, because Travis Etienne has the ability for breakaway speed if he's given running lanes. And kind of something I addressed earlier, contain Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because Clemson had a difficult time stopping J.K. Dobbins in the semifinal. If Clyde Edwards-Helaire is contained, I like Clemson's chances to win this game. But ultimately, the matchup to watch, there's kind of 2 of them. One I already addressed, and it's the pass rush versus the quarterbacks. That is one of them. Because Trevor Lawrence, we saw how his mobility can be a difference maker for Clemson. And if LSU can contain Trevor Lawrence, don't allow him to use his feet in the game, just like LSU was able to contain Jalen Hurts. LSU will have a strong chance to win this game. Ultimately, that comes down to one of those several things in determining a winner for the matchup. But the matchup within the matchup, another one, what I think is the best one to look out for, the wide receivers versus the secondary. Because both these teams have multiple wide receivers that are bound to be first-round draft picks. T. Higgins will be a first-round pick in the NFL draft this April. Justin Ross will be a first-round draft pick the year he ultimately puts his name into the NFL draft list. Justin Jefferson will be a first-round draft pick. Jamari Chase, the Biletnikoff winner, is a future first-round draft pick. So multiple weapons on both sides receiving. And versus the secondary. These are 2 very good secondary groups in this championship game. And ultimately, they will also be a difference maker in determining a winner for this game. So, both these teams, before I get to the pick, now this game, I think, is literally a coin flip. I think you can literally flip a coin and try to pick this winner. Because I think this game is very too close to call from my personal standpoints. I think this game is going to go in either direction. I don't buy that this game is going to be a blowout. I can't see either team blowing out the other. I think that both these teams will stay in it from start to finish, whether the defense will keep their offense in it or if it's going to be a shootout. But this national championship game, this also reminds me of Auburn and Oregon from a few years ago, where we all expected this game to be a high-scoring affair, but it ultimately ended up being a 22-19 victory in favor of the Auburn Tigers. But I think it's going to be the exact opposite. I think that this could end up being a high-scoring game, and I think it eventually will be a high-scoring game. But each of these teams has a significant advantage. For LSU, they have a quote-unquote home crowd advantage. I anticipate probably maybe 60 to 65% of this crowd being pro-LSU, with it being in New Orleans. Maybe probably even 70% LSU fans in that stadium. However, I don't know how significant of an advantage having more fans could help out in a championship game. Although we see a lot of the times when Alabama is in the SEC championship game, we see how it's usually pro-Alabama because it's very closer. It's in SEC territory, but more closer to Alabama territory. But this is a lot different. This is in the state of Louisiana, and LSU fans will probably pack the stadium. I think that is a bit of an advantage. However, I think an advantage that Clemson has, this is one that I think could actually matter more than a home crowd, and that is experience. And Clemson has just that. We have Trevor Lawrence with experience, ETN experience, Amari Rodgers experience, T. Higgins experience, Justin Ross experience. Quite a few members of that Clemson defense experience in championship games. And especially with the coaching staff for Clemson, experience in games like this. For LSU, it's going to be their first national championship game since 2011. And what happened last time is they got shut out by Alabama that night. And this will be Ed Ogeron's first national championship game being a head coach. So he's coaching his first national championship game. While on the other side, you have Dabo Swinney coaching in his fourth national championship game when the game kicks off. And also defensive coordinator Brent Venables, his fourth national championship game being a defensive coordinator. So the coaching staff for Clemson has a significant advantage, and I think that advantage is going to matter. However, in the end, remember how I said from the jump that this is the most hyped up national championship game ever, at least in a long time. And I said this game is literally a coin flip and go either way. That applies to my pick. And I think that this game, well, here's my bold prediction for it. I think this game will go into not one, not two, but 3 overtimes. So a triple overtime matchup. One for the ages. However, by a score of 48-45, I think the national champions will be the LSU Tigers. While I think that LSU, this appears to be their year. And right now the line is set at LSU at -5.5. I just can't see this game being a blowout on either side, as I addressed earlier. I think that both teams on defense are going to keep their teams in the game from start to finish. I think this game will surprisingly have a low-scoring game throughout the first portion of it. I think that both defenses are going to be able to, I think they're going to establish their dominance early on. And I think the later on we get into the game, I think the more points you're going to see. I think that both teams will come up empty on their first 2 offensive possessions. But then once we get to possessions 3 and 4, that's when the scoring is going to start taking place. But as a difference maker, I think that LSU's wide receivers of Justin Jefferson and Jamari Chase will be a difference in this game. So my final score, LSU 48, Clemson 45 in triple overtime. Mark it down.